2022 was a banner year for its cinemascape. Let's be real for a second. I know when it comes to the whole year-end list shtick, I tend to be more of a music guy, but if I'm being completely honest, I struggled to stay invested in the charts this year, and found myself incredibly behind on the year's albums. If I had done a Billboard best list like usual, half the list would have been songs that didn't even come out in 2022. And I'm not even someone who would have had Kate Bush on the list. On the flip side, the film scene was some of the most exciting and inviting I've witnessed in years. I'll be blunt, 2022 was a phenomenal year for films. I saw a lot of fantastic stuff this year, to the point where I probably could have tripled the list length and still been comfortable with my picks. I saw a lot of films this year, and I'm glad to say the majority of them were legitimately good. To be fair, I did make a conscious effort to ensure I had a reason to see something this year. In past years, I have enjoyed a lot of bullshit filmmaking for the sake of having seen it, and this year I just didn't. That's not to say I didn't remain open-minded towards films. There were plenty of films I saw this year that I didn't expect to like per se that I very much did. And on the flip side, there were a fair few films I was super excited for that I didn't really like much at all. But I didn't see, like, Black Adam. Why would I do that? Every movie I saw this year, good or bad, felt like something I could justify seeing or have a reason for. But rather than limiting myself, I actually wound up seeing more new films this year than I did in the last 2 years combined. I saw such a strong variety of films this year, spanning genres and structures, many of which I had likely unfairly neglected in the past. There are films you may love that I haven't seen, there are films I love that you may not have seen, maybe I just didn't think your favorite was my favorite. You might hate every film on this list. This video is not an order of objectivity, but rather just a showcase of the films I loved the most this year. The ones I connected with, the ones that made me feel new feelings and see new perspectives, the ones that made me excited about cinema. There are films I absolutely adored that did not make this list, and that's just how it worked out. If nothing else, I hope you can walk away from this video with some new titles you'll want to check out. Furthermore, I do not intend on making a worst list. Do not comment asking me for a worst list. I will not respond or oblige. I'm fully aware a lot of you guys want nothing more than for me to tear apart some easy film targets, and to many of you, hearing me discuss films I actually love is a bit of a chore. When you look back at the comments on my film reviews, if a film is recommended, it's usually one you guys think I'll hate. And sure, I enjoy being a negative ranty guy sometimes, and I do enjoy watching videos like that, but when it comes to the films of 2022, not only is my main feeling on it overwhelmingly positive to the point where a worst list feels bleh to me, the films I truly hated this year are not ones I want to put my energy into talking about. The worst film of 2022 was Dashcam, directed by Rob Savage. I am only telling you this to appease you. Don't ask me why. Do not pay more attention to this in the comments. There are plenty other films in this video you should be more interested in hearing me talk about. In fact, I'll go one further. Deadstream, directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winter, barely missed this best list, and it's kind of like if Dashcam was good. Go check that one out. I really loved it. Okay, all the obligatory list video spiel is out of the way, I think. Let's get to what we came for. Starting us off at number 22 is Mad Heidi, directed by Johannes Hartmann. This is a film that's kind of hard to talk about without spoiling the truly unique experience of seeing it, but I'll try my best. This is a Swissploitation movie about a woman fighting her government. It's very satirical and is an homage to many things. It's kind of like if Inglourious Basterds was made for the grindhouse aesthetic, and also it's an exploitation movie, and also it's much sillier. The humor in this film is hysterical, and much of the filmmaking plays into that, but the filmmaking never cheapens out to attain it. The film still looks fantastic, there's a lot of great production design and costume work, and whilst the editing often works with the comedy, it never feels like it's being used as a substitute for it. Every element is hand in hand here, and I adore how ambitious the whole project feels. The characters are all very distinct with big personalities, and I'm glad the cast was able to play this to their full potential. Alice Lucy, who plays the titular Heidi, is particularly great here. This is an insane role with a lot of range and requirements, and she pulled it off flawlessly. Even past the film's silliness, it still got a lot to say, particularly about fascism. I can't really say too much more without spoiling the fun here. It's available to watch primarily through their website at madheidi.com, so grab some friends and go in blind, because this is truly an experience unlike any other. At number 21 is Bardo, False Chronicle of a Handful of Truths, directed by Alejandro G. Inarritu. I'm aware that this film has been contentious and frustrating to some, and even many of its lovers seem to think that it takes till the second half to truly click. For me, however, Bardo was gripping from start to end, a fascinating nightmarescape pursuing identity in its wake, asking questions about the concepts of forgiveness, familial connection, and familiarity, and especially in regards to immigration. It's a very thought-provoking movie, and it has so much ambition to show that it very much justifies that 2-hour 39-minute runtime. Danielle Jimenez Casio does a phenomenal job, bringing all the necessary complexities to the role and giving a performance of battle, a fight between detachment and humanity. There's no denying the skill of the cast here, nor can the craft of the film be held back. Again, Bardo is an incredibly ambitious film, and it finds plenty of fascinating, non-linear ways to show things and communicate ideas to you. It's filled to the brim with breathtaking visuals, intricately framed with plenty of purpose at every turn, and bringing in unique visual conceptualization to back everything up, with a masterful play towards how context is an informant for much of it. There's a lot to notice from a technical standpoint in general. The visual effects are incredibly well handled and do a great job bringing these often very out there concepts to life. The production design is clever with a lot of thematic detailing and well-utilized reincorporation, and the sound work in the film is absolutely fantastic, feeling incredibly genuine. All in all, Bardo kept me captivated, and even if it's not a movie for everyone, it's one I'm sure everybody can at least respect. Give this one a chance. It's far from the most accessible film on this list, but it's still absolutely worth giving a shot. At number 20 is Nope, directed by Jordan Peele. An obvious pick for this list, but nonetheless a well-earned one. Jordan Peele's hat-trick scorer is by far his most ambitious work. The scale showcased in this movie and the utter magnitude of the concepts presented both thematically and literally, furthered by the insane technological advancements used to make the movie, are all mind-blowingly effective. And as tense and disturbing as this film can get, it's a joy to see every risk and every leap forward pay off so well. Of course, Jordan Peele's usual talents carry over. His direction here is dripping with glass, and the way he utilizes the known strengths of his actors whilst also getting them to play against type is stunning to watch. Particularly with how understated Daniel Kaluuya's role feels at times. Keke Palmer is the acting highlight, and whilst we're all fully aware of how funny she is, and whilst this film does let her shine in that area, it's great to see her excel in the more horror-focused and emotion-driven scenes. The energy she and Kaluuya bring to the screen greatly complement each other, and also further their chemistry as siblings and help to make them a much more convincing and dynamic pair. Once again, Peele's usage of foreshadowing is in a league of its own, and he knows just how to perfectly plant a seed without shoving it in your face, whilst also not making every connection feel like a leap of faith. From a visual standpoint, this is quite possibly his best work, with engaging framing and some visually enthralling set pieces. It also features yet another great score from Michael Eales, which greatly complements the tone of the film whilst also establishing it as a very different film from Peele's others. Whilst Nope is still just as thought-provoking and clever, brimming with interesting themes and interpretive moments, scenes that stick with me and strike fear in my heart, it feels like the film also has a blockbuster side to it, particularly in the final third. It has elements of genres Peele is familiar with, but the elements of sci-fi and adventure drawn in are new territory that he still manages to excel in. There are a lot of films on this list I'm certain aren't for everyone and will leave people divided. There are films on this list I get a feeling some of you won't be fond of, so believe me when I say Nope is one of those movies I'm certain is a crowd pleaser, and I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already. At number 19 is Special Delivery, directed by Park Dae-min. Now, I've always been someone who's been open to all kinds of movies and genres, and even if you didn't know that before watching this video, there's no way in hell this list doesn't prove it. But being quite honest, I find myself unimpressed with a lot of the action movies I watch. I personally think that's because a lot of action movies don't understand tone and make choices for the sake of seeming cool and insist they're serious films but have plots and characters the tone cannot account for. Too many action movies that insist they be taken seriously feature things I cannot take seriously, and too many action movies with lighter tones lean way too far into it and rely upon it. I can be extremely forgiving of insane logic leaps if the tone justifies it. Typically, I just want to feel exhilarated and excited whilst having characters in a story I can somewhat invest in, and typically action movies do not achieve that for me. Special Delivery, however, went absolutely above and beyond. This film is an insane ride that I am overjoyed feels like a legitimate experience rather than background noise. With slick directing and fast-paced action extravaganzas, Special Delivery manages to perfectly ride the line of its tone down to a T. And when it chooses to be cheesier or slows down for the characters, it never manages to lose you en route. Fronted by a dazzling and strong performance from Park So-dam, who some of you may remember as Ki Young from Parasite, this movie is a thrill ride that knows exactly how to keep you involved. The set pieces are glorious and driven up to 11 constantly, and the film entraps them with characters that have a lot to them. Sure, what you're seeing is fun, but there's an added layer because you actually somewhat care about it, which is refreshing to see. There's genuine stakes, and again, the way the film is toned and paced adds to that. It's also incredibly well edited throughout, further amplifying tone and tension, and with an electrifying score and some surprisingly great cinematography work to boot, Special Delivery delivers, no pun intended, on being the exact kind of action movie I want to see more of. I haven't heard nearly enough buzz surrounding this one, and it's a very accessible movie, especially compared to some other films on this list, so check it out as soon as you get a chance. At number 18 is Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul, directed by Adama Ibo. I'm aware that this film is somewhat divisive, mainly because the religious crowd isn't a fan of it, but personally speaking, Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul is a movie that hits perfectly in all the right places. The humor is effortlessly funny, and our leads Regina King and Sterling K. Brown take to it wonderfully. The duality in their performances is genuinely stunning to watch, and seeing how they can flip personas when off camera while still feeling like the same person is truly outstanding. They take these characters to the fullest, and whilst there is a sense of satire at times, the performances still feel grounded. They find the perfect way to portray an out-of-touch headspace that these characters claim under the guise of eccentricity. It's also an interesting symbolization in itself, showcasing how far people will go when in the spotlight, even if uncaring for those they drag along with them. The way the movie is edited adds to this significantly, and both manages to elevate the humor and create a consistent tonal undercurrent in the serious scenes. The changes in filming style, aspect ratio, and shot length do a great service of accentuating two different feels for this movie that come together for one fantastic package. There are sequences from this film that still play on repeat in my mind and leave me absolutely floored. The way the basketball scene showcases the manipulation and hypocrisy behind a lot of preachers in the vein of the characters shown is magnificent. And the way Sterling K. Brown performs it is so perfect to a T that it may actually be one of the best scenes of the entire year. Needless to say, this is a film that stuck with me, and I truly can't recommend it enough. At number 17 is Men, directed by Alex Garland. I get the feeling that this might be the most contentious pick on this list. I know a lot of people really hate it, but I personally really love this movie. Regardless of content, I'm sure we can all agree that the technical aspects of this film are truly outstanding. Men is easily one of the most beautiful looking films of the entire year, showcasing all the beauty in its location with lots of stunning greens and very clever usage of framing, angles, and camera movements to further the tone and make the tone more effectively terrifying. The music, both licensed and scored, is fantastic, with really appropriate usage and some excellent thematic purpose. The practical effects are immaculate, the production design is well crafted and cleverly detailed, the sound design is effective and creeping, and it's extremely well edited to boot. The performances are phenomenal too, with some really strong and ambitious work from Rory Kinnear, and one of my favorite performances of the entire year from Jessie Buckley. He's always been great at showing absolute terror and transcending to the extremes and flats of each required emotion. At the very least, even if you do not like this movie, there is a lot to like about it. The content tends to be what divides people, and to me at least, I found the content to be incredibly satisfying, disturbing, and thought-provoking all in one. There are sequences and shots that are among the most horrifying things I've seen in any movie, but it importantly never feels like it's all for shock value. There's a lot of value, purpose, and interpretability behind what you are being shown, and the ways in which the film chooses to show these things and communicate them is extremely intelligent. The narrative is equally fascinating and creepy, and I love how the film uses its non-linear tone to stretch the fabric of its own limitations as it keeps going, always being sure to push you just that bit further until its very end. Both in terms of giving the viewer a lot to chew on and being an entertaining yet uncomfortable watch, Men absolutely succeeds. I'm fully aware this movie isn't quite for everyone, but in spite of that, I think it's a must-see anyway. Some of the most interesting films are the ones people either love or hate, and those movies are worth watching if not just to see where you stand on them. Oh, and also recommending this one because I like it. You get the idea. At number 16 is Hellraiser, directed by David Bruckner. With 2022, there were a lot of films that felt robbed of a theatrical experience, and that I wish had not been straight to streaming. Prey is another notable one. I was lucky enough to see Glass Onion at London Film Festival, but those who didn't see it then or on its 1 week cinema run were stuck with a straight to Netflix treatment. And there's another film I don't want to mention just yet that was particularly done dirty by this practice. But without a doubt in my mind, no movie was robbed harder than Hellraiser 2022. This is quite genuinely one of the scariest movies I've seen in a long time. The choice to lean into conceptually based terror and character focus really sets this movie apart for me. There are scenes and sequences that communicate similar ideas to other movies, but the way Hellraiser chooses to show and present these scenes truly puts it into its own league. The presentation as a whole is also fantastic, with the movie's striking visuals complemented by great framing and shot composition. The cast is all fantastic, and I found myself invested in pretty much everyone on screen at all times. There's a lot of changes between this and the original from 1987, and since these are two very different movies telling very different stories, it doesn't really take away from either film. But that being said, every change was made for the better in my opinion. Both films have very different levels of pacing that are great in each respective film, but here the slower, drawn-back pacing makes sense because the film is more focused on its themes and characters. The Cenobites also have far more presence here than in the original, but they're also stronger characters and serve more of a purpose in this film. I also prefer their designs here and think the makeup and prosthetics work was phenomenal. I've noticed a lot of people complaining about the way this movie is lit, but personally I had no issue with it. I have to wonder if home setup plays any part in this. I watched it on my laptop in my room with the lights off and blinds closed, and I had no problem telling what was happening. I quite liked the way the movie was lit and how it played in parts with the film's coloring work at times too. Again, this is an issue I think less people would have if they saw the movie in a cinema setting, but I suppose we'll never know. All in all, I genuinely really loved this movie. It's intelligent, scary, and a hell of an investing ride that I wish wasn't just shoved onto Hulu next to shit like Grimcutty. Check it out as soon as you can, and maybe ensure you watch it with the right setup or you might struggle to see some things, I guess. At number 15 is Klondike, directed by Marina Gorbach. This is a movie that to me is completely owned by its camera and tone. It utilizes a lot of impressive long and unbroken takes, and the scale of the content and blocking within these takes is very ambitious and intricate, which makes me all the more glad to say it absolutely pays off. The cinematography in this film is some of the best of the year, and whilst it is not all the movie has to offer, it is an undeniably phenomenal aspect that even the most negative towards the film will draw acclaim from. As for the movie's tone, the long takes and shot composition are cleverly utilized to draw further tension out of a scene, giving the film a constant build-up and ensuring excellent payoffs. Furthermore, the actual content of the film is remarkably well handled, and Marina Gorbach manages to draw some excellent performances out from her actors whilst cleverly unfolding their characters to the naked eye. The themes of this movie are well realized in the context of the story, and the way this film chooses to tell its story is endlessly captivating. It feels like there was a larger focus placed on the how than the what. It's never just about what is happening, but about how we got there and all the connecting parts. Furthermore, to harken back to the amazing cinematography, the focus wasn't just getting the shot. It was finding how to best get the shot with regards to the visuals, the tone, and the content itself. It's also worth mentioning the incredible musical score, which adds to the tone immensely but wisely never opts to overpower it. It's an overall enthralling cinematic experience I'd highly recommend, and I feel ever so lucky to have caught in a cinema at that. At number 14 is Bodies, 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 directed by Helena Rain. Now, with 2022's films, I tried to make time to see a lot of different movies, and as a result, I didn't do many repeat viewings before making this list. If I was doing them, it had to be on the movie's own merit. With that being said, not only did Bodies, Bodies, Bodies receive a second viewing, it's actually one of the very few I gave a second viewing in cinemas. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is an incredibly smart and witty horror comedy that manages to satirize Gen Z heavily, whilst not alienating them from the audience either. It feels genuine rather than preachy or pretentious, and it's delivered with excellent writing and performances to boot. The characters are a joy to watch, even at their most obnoxious, and Bodies, Bodies, Bodies perfectly understands how to keep us engaged with them while still highlighting their immense flaws. I also love this movie's ability to play around with common cliches in the horror genre whilst making them feel completely justified. To say this script had a lot of care put into it would be an understatement. As mentioned, the cast is all excellent, and Rachel Sennett in particular is worth mentioning as Alice here, delivering one of the funniest performances I've seen in a very long time. The film is captivating and unpredictable, and there's quite a lot to pick up on the second viewing that I really enjoyed. Seeing it twice in cinemas also meant I can confirm this movie is a perfect movie to watch in a big crowd, as the audience reactions were exquisite, and by the second viewing there were moments in the film where I was excited to see the reactions from the audience, to which they did not disappoint. Even from a technical standpoint, this is still a very well-made movie. The way the film is framed, lit, and colored is all very creative and purposeful without ever feeling unnatural. I also really enjoyed the musical score from the excellent Disaster Piece, who also composed the music for It Follows and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, and the licensed and original songs are all well utilized too. The movie is overall just an absolute blast that I can't recommend enough. Whether you love the current generation or you hate them, you'll find plenty to enjoy in this outrageously funny slice of satire. At number 13 is Eales, directed by Jerzy Skolimowski. There's something so surreal yet so cutting about this one. For those unfamiliar, Eales is a Polish movie that follows a donkey traversing through life, and yet it manages to serve as so much more here, telling an enthralling tale about the inherent cruelty and egotism of the human race through the eyes of an innocent animal impacted by it. It's hypercritical, showcasing the cause for our own desires with very little care to what they can cause. Even good intentions hold horrific consequences, but there's a lack of care from those in power there. The people claiming to do the right thing are too full of themselves to see their own harm, and the people who don't claim don't even care to try. There's a strong narrative here that I never lost engagement with, constantly keeping me fascinated and invested with no real idea of where the film was going. Its structural choice to essentially serve as a showcase of the pitfalls of humanity whilst traveling different paths makes it very easy to flow an unpredictable narrative to. The acting is all very strong, and yes, that does extend to the titular donkey. And boy oh boy do I ever love this film from a technical perspective. The framing follows many different stylizations and plays around creatively with frame rates, pull speeds, color choices, depth of field, and many other techniques to properly convey the film's ideas. Beautiful locations utilized are used very effectively too, and certainly elevate the visuals. The way the film is edited and cut is very strong and purposeful, and the film moves along at a snappy pace, never overstaying its welcome or dragging any scene out for too long. My favorite aspect of the film might actually be the original score, from composer Pavel Mikietin. There's so much character to the compositions, with an interesting variety of instrumentation to match the visuals perfectly. And the way it plays a round of melodies to explore the film's themes and ideals is masterful. So yeah, in short, I really enjoyed the movie where a donkey explores Poland for an hour and a half. Society is a curse and humanity is a plague. Check it out! At number 12 is Fire of Love, directed by Sarah Dosa. I'm just gonna jump straight to the obvious and say that this is one of the most visually breathtaking and stunning documentaries I've ever seen. The kind of footage and images that Katya and Maurice Kraft were able to capture were extremely impressive and impactful, and the combination of that here with the editing, sound design, and music really helped further this movie's atmosphere. The narrative is fascinating to follow, and I found myself extremely invested in Katya and Maurice, as well as their daring expeditions and some of the arguably insane things they do. It's a very informative watch, offering some wholly interesting perspectives with a great usage of tone and some fantastic narration courtesy of Miranda July. I'm not really sure what else to say with Fire of Love. It's a very self-explanatory film in that regard. It's available now on streaming. I saw it on Disney+, but maybe it's a Hulu situation in the US, I have no idea. All I know is that you should watch it. Don't let the fact that it's a documentary deter you. Even if you're not a fan of that medium, the way this narrative unfolds and the way this film is presented makes it very accessible regardless of the fact. At number 11 is The Menu, directed by Mark Mylod. A wickedly funny critique on the elitists that serves as a biting commentary on modern culture and audience expectations themselves, The Menu is a sharp comedy thriller not afraid to deliver on the shocks. The way this film looks into so many perspectives and creates so many interesting characters for its wonderful ensemble to play around with and demonstrate its ideas through is masterful, and the craft of the movie is undeniable. Every element goes hand in hand, and oftentimes the technical elements serve as part of the joke. The way The Menu utilizes its editing and production design to further implement humor is truly exquisite, and the film perfectly understands how to balance its tone to the favor of the joke. It's an often shocking experience that keeps you hooked and that you never feel you can expect, taking constant turns until you arrive at the unbelievably satisfying finale. But there's never a moment where the humor undercuts the rippling tension, or when a joke interrupts a moment of fear. It all balances out and makes perfect sense both contextually and thematically. The look and feel to the movie is very lavish, with excellent framing work and some truly delicious food cinematography, set against the backdrop of an intricately designed restaurant that always feels fresh no matter how long you stay in it. There's plenty of creative dexterity to relish in here, but the backbone of the dish is its phenomenal screenplay and riveting sense of humor. At number 10 is Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, directed by Sophie Hyde. Sophie Hyde's previous movie Animals was one I somewhat liked but felt had lots of room for improvement. There were strong performances, but the script felt kinda held back in regards of its thematic presentation and character writing. With Good Luck to You, Leo Grande, however, the script is probably my favorite thing about the whole movie. Rather than being based on a book like Animals was, this is an original screenplay penned by Katie Brand, and it feels very much like the characters were the priority here. There's a small scale and tiny cast, the movie almost never leaves a hotel room, and that's great because it puts full importance on what this story needs to work. Emma Thompson and Daryl McCormack are both fantastic here, and get a lot of opportunity to show their acting range. They have fantastic chemistry, but they never overplay into it, and they let it blossom with its own natural capability. There's also strong technical elements on display here. The cinematography is never dull despite the limitations set by the location, but it never feels unpurposeful either. There's always a precise and clear reason why you're seeing something, and the film holds a lot of depth in what it chooses to show. The music, both licensed and originally composed, was very well utilized and complemented the film very well without overpowering it. The editing may honestly be the best I've seen all year. And in a year of films willing to be more open about sex, and sex work in particular in the mainstream, this is probably one of the strongest as well as the most thoughtful and normalizing. This movie takes time to destigmatize plenty of aspects about the profession without ever making it feel deviating from the characters or the story. It's just a very natural movie, and I really love that about it. Check it out if you haven't already, it's 100% worth your time. At number 9 is Athena, directed by Roman Gavras. If I had to call any movie this year a filmmaking achievement, it would 100% be Athena. If by chance you haven't heard of this film, it's because it's been absolutely buried on Netflix and they just refuse to promote it for some reason. I don't know what the hell their deal is lately, but they are missing the trick here. Athena is by far the best shot film of the entire year, and it's not even close. The countless long takes as well as the ambition of the blocking and what they're trying to show is beyond impressive. And when I say long, I mean long. The opening scene is an unbroken 12-minute shot, and it's probably the strongest opener of the entire year. The movie's usage of continuous long takes is more than just stunning though, as it continuously immerses you whilst never cutting away to add further to the tension. The story of the film is just as important as its presentation, and I'm overjoyed to say that the story works too. The characters and their dynamics are instantly interesting, and the further the film goes and the more we see their ideologies and relationships pushed and challenged, the further we grow invested in who they are. There's a lot of great social commentary here too on police brutality, survivor's guilt, and grief, with a lot of clever symbolism. The performances are outstanding, and Sami Sulaiman is particularly exceptional here. This is very much a movie that deserves to be experienced, and it sucks that Netflix refuses to care about the films on its platform. So do yourself a favor and load this one up next time you're on the platform, because it deserves far better than it's getting. At number 8 is The Banshees of Inisherin, directed by Martin McDonagh. His previous film, 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, was one I personally really loved but seemed to prove a bit polarizing among general audiences. This one, however, seems to be a lot more well received, and I'm happy to say I think it's even better. Martin McDonagh has an insane talent at creating the perfect balance between comedy and tragedy. The Banshees of Inisherin is absolutely hysterical when it wants to be, with a dry sense of wit and a lot of joy found in its blunt delivery choices. But it doesn't pull its punches, and its tale of a friendship reaching its sudden end is arguably one of the most heartbreaking stories of the entire year. Everyone you see on screen has so much depth to their character, and every interaction you see is flavored with so much detail and importance that you're glued to the screen constantly. One of the particular strengths held in this movie's character writing is showcasing facades. Characters often act differently when other characters aren't around, and the way they interact or talk varies depending on it, but they always feel like that same character with a great deal of consistency. The way the script portrays its themes is also stunning, and I really love the perspectives it offers on time and the value of what we do in our lives. There's a lot of purposeful and beautiful cinematography, aided by the beautiful locations and scenery surrounding the film's tale and the fantastic production design. I also really enjoyed Carter Burwell's score, and this movie was a rare occasion where I could tell immediately who composed the music without knowing beforehand. And of course, the cast is fantastic, but I held off on mentioning them because despite a shared excellence, the only one I really want to bring up is Kerry Condon, delivering my absolute favorite performance of the entire year. She gets to showcase plenty of emotional range, but utilizes clever detailing and subtlety within her practice, playing it all very naturally and feeling, for lack of a better term, human. Her interactions with Brendan Gleeson's character in particular showcase her acting ability, and it seems like she often draws from the 5 stages of grief throughout the film, which is an incredible decision regarding her character and where she ends up. Check this one out as soon as possible, although I do want to warn that as funny as it is, it does get kinda heavy at points and it does not hold back in the slightest, so be ready for that. At number 7 is Everything Everywhere All at Once, directed by Dan Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, aka the Daniels. This is a movie that should not need justification for being on this list. It's one of the most agreeably amazing movies of the year, the decade, the century, all time, you name it, it's probably true. Truth be told, there's an argument to be made that I should probably be focusing my energy on why this movie isn't higher. But on the other hand, I don't really feel like focusing my energy on why a film here is worse than another. This is a video to celebrate the best of 2022's films, and I do not intend to wipe the lens of positivity away to pull on a mask of contrarianism. Even if other movies this year have been better, that doesn't make Everything Everywhere All at Once any less of a cinematic game changer. The Daniels have crafted something truly special here. This script is so ambitious with so many ideas and tones and concepts, yet it all comes together so eloquently. The cast is also great, and everyone really gets a lot to do. One of my favorite things about the writing here is that every character gets to play around with so many distinct ideas and personalities, yet they still feel somewhat tied into the same traits and principles. Every multiverse is just a different layering of these, and it's particularly present in characters like Evelyn and Joy. It's an exhilarating and exciting movie in many ways, but also a deep and emotional one. I've seen this one a few times now, but even on first watch, certain scenes were burned into my mind. Certain shots, lines, songs, and score work, motifs, ideas, even just looks from the actors, all so impactful so fast. I am so glad that this is a film so many are able to connect with. It's not often that a huge crowd pleaser can also be considered an artsy critic movie, but the Daniels seem to have struck gold here. If you're watching this video, you've probably already seen this one. I don't need to recommend it. You were probably waiting for it to show up. But watch it again anyway. It's great. At number 6 is Sick of Myself, directed by Christopher Borgli. Likely one of the funniest movies of the year, Sick of Myself is an already deeply entertaining watch furthered by how truly committed to the bit it is. This movie has some serious guts, and I'm really glad to say it never skimped out or steered away from the furthest depths it could reach. The performances, particularly that of Christine Eckhoyat-Thorpe as our narcissist protagonist Signe, help this process immensely. And the casual slant to these performances of truly awful people make them all the more convincing. No one is ever over the top for the sake of a laugh. It's a naturalistic feel to the characters in these horrendous, self-inflicted situations, seeking attention at any cost, that makes the humor work so well. It's a well-made feature too, with some particularly impressive practical effects. The tone of the movie glides around discomfort with extreme pleasure, and these awkward, terrible situations derive both humor and horror from you with perfect effect. You're disgusted by these characters, but remain fascinated and invested in them. And the film plays about with that as well as how situations can affect them extremely cleverly. It plays out in a way many films going for similar feels recently left me wanting, and goes all the way in a way I felt derived of. It feels great to see a movie which never chickens out of its own premise, and in the way it keeps itself fresh, continues to up the shock factor and never bow down. To call this movie satisfying might not be the best word in the book, but it hits the mark in a surprising amount of ways. I would highly recommend you give this one a shot. It's pretty hilarious, yet extremely daring, and if you like me and have been waiting for a movie to hit this sweet spot only to keep finding yourself underwhelmed, this may be your cinematic salvation. At number 5 is All the Beauty and the Bloodshed, directed by Laura Poitras. This is a documentary about the activism that Nan Goldin spearheaded against the Sackler family, and in that respect it's a very interesting account towards a topic I previously didn't know too much about. But what this movie explores and informs on, as well as what it stands for, goes so much further than that. This is an exploration of sexuality, addiction, abuse, accountability, mental health, the AIDS epidemic, art and the idea of censorship around it, trauma, and so much more. This documentary does a really great job of balancing all its topics out and switching between backstory or background information on Goldin's life and character, and the topic of the actual activism in regard to the Sackler family's involvement in the growth of the opioid epidemic. Everything shown feels absolutely necessary and impactful, and the film knows exactly whose perspectives to take in when and how to work into them. There's a purposely slow pacing to this film, but the intimacy to which it handles and explores its topics makes it absolutely appropriate. Plenty of scenes go by with pauses left in what the interviewees are saying, and it always feels effective and justified. The editing of this film is very striking and reserved in general, and many sequences backed by an interview take the styling of one of Goldin's own photography showcases, cutting from image to image with very little footage itself. Yet it always cuts at the right moment, and it never grows stale. In fact, it delivers a further sense of connections that allows you to see these experiences right through Goldin's own perspectives and her own memory. It connects you to her in a uniquely meaningful way that few documentaries achieve. When the film is showing relevant footage, it always has the desired emotional impact, and works perfectly to the intended tone of the given topic. To be frank, All the Beauty and the Bloodshed is easily the best documentary I've seen in a very long time, and the hype surrounding it is more than deserved. Check this one out as soon as you get a chance. At number 4 is Bones and All, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Bones and All is a movie that has strongly stuck with me since seeing it at London Film Festival this year, and I didn't expect this tale of two cannibals on a road trip to be so genuinely beautiful and touching. Luca Guadagnino is a director whose works I've always really enjoyed, and Bones and All seems to tap into the strengths of Call Me By Your Name and Suspiria in particular, whilst building even further past them. It's such an entrancing movie, strikingly haunting yet endearing every step of the way, with a strong tonal balance that pays off. As always, it's an aesthetically stunning feature with plenty of mesmerizing shots and a great set of designs that communicate so much with every feature. There's a sense of underplayed restraint in this film's presentation that I really love too. Guadagnino has always known how to craft a visual feast that can still pull back and focus on its characters and themes, and this is his best yet in that regard. It's such a striking and impactful tale with scenes and moments that have been burned into my mind. The performances from Taylor Russell and Timothée Chalamet are so reserved and considerate, with an excellent chemistry between them. It's easily the best work I've seen from either, and it's a shame awards shows hate horror movies because they deserve some recognition. Mark Rylance also deserves mention. He was unsettling as hell, and his performance was perfectly utilized. They all truly understand their characters and feel like real people, humanized to a T. Yes, they're cannibals, but this movie explores past that and shows us who they are and, in contrast, who they want to be. There's a lot of undercurrent thematic writing within this script, and it's incredibly touching in its presentation. Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross deliver yet another incredible score here too, and their original song for the picture, You Made It Feel Like Home, is one of my favorite songs of the whole year. To summarize, Luca Guadagnino has done it again and continues to prove why he is one of the best directors working today. Check this one out, it may seem a little much for some, but it's worth giving a chance. At number 3 is Leonor Will Never Die, directed by Martika Ramirez Escobar. When watching films, it's not uncommon to see a trend of films that love film, serving as a love letter to the very medium they're crafted within. However, I'd argue an experience in the same vein as Leonor Will Never Die shows its face much rarer, as this film is an ambitious, caring, and off-the-wall ride that does what it wants when it wants and works all the better for it. To call this movie an insane and unique experience honestly feels like I'm underselling it. The tale of a retired action director who is transported into the world of one of her own unfinished scripts is already encapsulating in concept, but this movie goes so far with it and showcases it in perhaps the most creative and original way it possibly could have managed. The whole cast is phenomenal, and Sheila Francisco has no problems getting into the role of perhaps the most lovable protagonist of the year, managing to perfectly embody every fragment of emotion and depth behind her persona. It's an extremely funny film with a roller coaster of a tone, but it also has a lot of interesting ideas and things to say about not only film and our connections with it, but ideas such as grief and the true power wielded by love. One of my favorite things about Leonor Will Never Die is also how much it goes for with the aesthetic. The sound work, editing, framing, music, it all all feels so authentic, and from a technical standpoint, this movie is truly a cut above the rest. Overall, it was an overjoying experience to have, and I feel so lucky to have gotten to experience it. I truly hope that if you two get the chance, it leaves you feeling the same way. At number 2 is Next Sohee, directed by Julie Jung. This movie is legitimately grueling. It is a heartbreaking, emotionally draining, unfiltered experience that never lets up or gives you a chance to escape its misery. Once you're in for its ride, you're strapped in at full speed until the end, and every moment of apparent happiness is layered with an undercurrent dread of its implications or where it's going. I completely understand that this description will turn a lot of people off, and to many it sounds unpleasant in a way they refuse to fathom. But to me, Next Sohee was an incredibly powerful and important watch that, as unforgiving as it gets, is justified at every turn. Serving as a daring critique on externship programs and corporational corruption, and as a bravely honest piece on grief and responsibility, Next Sohee handles its topics of depression, suicide, and the societal expectations and pressures placed on students with a blunt sense of candor. The direction here is intentionally not particularly showy, utilizing the filmmaking elements purely to showcase its story unless utilizing a motif, in which case it portrays its ideal through a differing type of shot in order to plant that seed in our minds. It's a very well-made movie that is confident in what it has to say, and never feels the need to overcompensate with its technical elements. It knows that its importance and significance is primarily rooted in its bones. The performances are magnificent and believable, and the script is, again, emotionally destroying. Next Sohee never forgets the importance of its characters, but it perfectly demonstrates how in these constructs of exploitative malfeasance, people are not viewed as people. They're numbers made to boost other numbers, utilized for the personal gain of others with no regard for who they themselves are, and a sickly cruel nature towards them if they step out of line. There are scenes that are horrifyingly real, showcasing the disgusting truth to what goes on in these systems. In particular, the way this movie handles things such as blame or supposed liability and truth is incredibly telling. Next Sohee is a movie where the battle is lost with a crushing blow, and it's a movie that reflects what is reality for a lot of people. To me, it's one of the year's most important watches, and I cannot recommend it enough. And finally, at number 1 is The Whale, directed by Darren Aronofsky. To be honest, I'm not even sure where to start with this movie. It's a hard one to talk about in detail and recommend in the same breath. I was lucky enough to see it blind at London Film Festival, and I think going in knowing as little as possible will make the experience all the more powerful. Although I will admit there were certain details I didn't pick up on until repeated viewings. So, while I do fully intend to voice my feelings on this film as far as possible, I must again recommend that you see this film knowing as little as possible. Now that that's out of the way, The Whale is a movie that will receive very obvious acclaim, but I still have to wonder if that quite does it justice. Yes, Brendan Fraser is excellent in this movie, there's no doubt about that, and it seems to be one of the few things people can agree on in regards to The Whale. But even then, I feel he hasn't been given enough credit. The character of Charlie is a very fleshed out personality, and the emotions are a constant high throughout. He is a beacon of hope, looking for the good left in the universe, but at times finds himself absorbed in his own hopelessness. He faces a conundrum in himself, and his insecurity towards who he is now, as well as his sadness from the past, cast him deep into an inescapable rut. There are so many layers to every moment of this performance, from the ones where he experiences rare comfort to the ones where he takes out his infuriation and dissatisfaction on himself and those around him. He finds himself as the light at the end of his own tunnel, and has a lot to process the entire movie, plagued by doubt and regret as he tries desperately to make one thing right before his time is up. It's worth noting from that the performances as a whole are fantastic. Fraser isn't even my favorite in the film either, as Hong Chow delivers an insanely emotional performance as the only person left in Charlie's life, proving a ruthless yet loyal friend despite her own hardships, suffering with the turmoils of reliving her past traumas, and losing that feeling of control that's helped her through this far. Chow gets a lot of layers to work with also, and without spoiling anything, her relationship with the idea of trust itself is very interestingly explored. It's needless to say I'm a fan of this movie's script. The characters are distinctly fascinating, and it's interesting to see how differing combinations within their interactions bring out new sides of them previously unknown. As I'm sure I've made clear in this video, I'm often more interested in how we as an audience get somewhere rather than what we get to, and the ways in which we receive information about the characters in this movie is relishing in fascination and depth. There's also a lot of really powerful dialogue and thematic motifs, and the way this film builds a mix of hope and tension within its structure is masterful. Furthermore, from a technical standpoint, this movie is incredibly impressive. It's almost entirely a single location movie, yet the cinematography stays fresh, with Aronofsky finding as many refreshing and interesting ways to showcase the story within the locational constraints. The work of cinematographer Matthew Libatique can't go understated either. Having worked with of Aronofsky many times before, yet still bringing this film its own visual personality through the way he frames it. Furthermore, the production design is immaculately detailed and interesting, also unraveling itself over the course of the film, and I'm sure I hardly need to affirm how incredible the makeup work is. It's also worth mentioning how great the score is, and how appropriately and respectfully it was used too. This is a film that has confidence in its actors and its writing, and whilst the technical elements take it further, they never feel like they're compensating for anything. It all comes together with an incredible amount of purpose and understanding of itself. It's funny, I've said so much, yet still feel as though I'm holding back. The Whale is truly just that incredible a movie, and it's one I'd highly recommend. I'd even go so far as to call it the best movie of 2022. And there we have it, my favorite movies of 2022. Was there something you thought was missing from the list? Comment your own opinions down below so I can see what your favorites were. And even if you disagreed with some of the picks on this list, or there was something you felt was missing, I hope I left you with at least one film that you might not have heard of or have considered that you can go check out. Anyways, that's the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe, check out my music available on all streaming services. I'm bad at outros, and I'll see you in whatever I do next.